I have a shameless plug. I really appreciate you guys listening in some ways to my conversations about identity, but did you know that chatting isn't the only thing I do? I love to paint. And now you can have a bit of my art in your house. It also makes great gifts, by the way. So check it out at aubreyjeanart.etsy.com. That's aubreyjeanart.etsy.com. And also hit me up on Instagram at my handle, aubreyjeanart. I'd love to hear from you. Welcome to 132nd Cherokee, a podcast exploring why being 132nd of a bloodline is meaningless. And surprisingly not at the same time. I'm your host, Aubrey Jean. With me today is my friend Jen Hauser, a writer, YouTuber, and a fellow human. I brought her on today because she made a side comment about her family and it felt familiar, so I knew we had to talk. There's a caveat about this episode. I have a cold, so my voice is in a low register, and it's hard to hear sometimes. How annoying. Sorry. Hope you enjoy. So we just talked to your parents. We're going to do a little out of order, but what was the kind of a recap of what your parents were talking about? A recap of what we talked about, why I was like, I need to get you on the microphone right now.
I think just a big thing was how invested my grandparents were in that, in their identity. It's like going to drive you crazy that she's making little noises.
I don't know. Mia, how are you doing? Her ears perked up. She's a dog.
Good girl.
For those podcast people who can't see her.
Have those little subtle sounds in the background.
That's not Jen, my friend. That is my other furry friend, Mia. I don't know if I'm part of her pack yet, but I will be.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. She likes you more than me sometimes.
Does she?
I think
she
so.
definitely likes it when I have food, so there's that.
Got the important things.
Yeah, so we were talking earlier today about just identity. You know, how much identity we kind of absorb from our parents and our grandparents. And when I was telling my story about the Native American ancestry that I have, I think kind of said the same thing.
I think.
Yeah.
that's really the question
here. That's the mystery for myself, right? I'm not exactly sure, but it's been family lore for a really long time. And it is part of when we were growing up, we talked about it all the time. Like I said, I rub shoulders with a lot of the other older generations of my family. They're long lived, and for them, you know, my great grandfather, I knew him, so I was a kid when he died, but I was hanging out with my great grandpa, and it was just common knowledge that he was part Native American, and it was his grandma who was full Cherokee. So yeah, but then the mystery that I uncovered last year, which I haven't told my grandmother yet, is that that name I can't find on the DOS rolls. And so it's kind of a big deal. And I've struggled with should I tell my grandmother or not? I might edit this out. Anyway, so yeah, what was your experience?
It's true. I mean, it is kind of nerve-wracking, I think, if you're trying to let out the family secrets. And I think, especially with Native American heritage, that could be something that can be more sensitive in discovery-wise than others that I think of, at least. You know, my family, different family members on both sides have been really into family history. And so it's kind of exciting when you hear like, oh, you're related to this royal person down the line in the 14th century in this nation, you know, fun little tidbits. But one thing that was really important or special for us was that we had Native American heritage. And I still remember when I was, you know, probably a young teen, when they're like, oh, we found a third tribe, not just 2 tribes of Native Americans, it's 3. And that was so special because, well, you know, yeah, I can list off the other dozen things of, oh yeah, I have Swedish, Danish, English, especially as a very European-based white girl.
I was going to say, not to assume, but I think you're as white as I am. That's what it looks like.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm whiter. Maybe it's also because I never go into the sun. But you know, I burn at the drop of a hat. And you know, it was just kind of that special thing of like, oh yeah, we're not just European, like we've got Native American in us. And that's just this whole nuance to it.
Why do you think we feel special about that? Because I felt that too. I was like really super proud about it. Like, I'm part Cherokee and my grandmother is registered with a reservation. I've said that several times a day.
I don't know why. I think
dismissed. I felt dismissed.
I don't know that I've ever felt that way, that like, oh, you're boring, but in a lot of ways it is dismissive, as a writer looking at publishing or different things, you say, oh, well, like white people have their things. We were talking about preferences, people really want to focus. They want to focus on own voices. They want to focus on minorities. I mean, granted, like you, it was way down the list. It's not like I was going to get some publishing deal or some grand acknowledgement because I had some sort of minority in my bloodline. But I think it's just, you don't feel that division. And I don't know that I'm explaining well. I think there's political, but there's also personal, that focus on identity. I don't know if I can explain better why I thought really it was so much more special.
Yeah, I felt special too, and I can't really explain it either. And that's why I wanted to do the podcast, because there are a lot of nuances that I just frankly don't understand. I am white, like you said, political. We're going to be talking about political things because it is wrapped up, like cultural identity is wrapped up in political.
Yeah, you can't get away from it.
Yeah. And then at the same time, especially with today's climate and, wanting racial justice and wanting to promote anti-racism and those things are important to me. And at the same time, so I don't want to overstep, and I don't want to do something. I guess I feel like I'm not supposed to do this, to do something. I'm not supposed to appropriate cultures. And I want to know what the appropriate way is to have a cultural identity without appropriating it. And then the thing is, I am 132nd Cherokee. There's a lot of things, I'll go into later, in the podcast or the whole podcast about how it is that I really do believe that we are, maybe as opposed to like, I don't know about
our stories obviously aren't identical. So
right.
I'm not saying you aren't just because.
No, but we haven't gotten the ancestry DNA. And I know that's, because your DNA could be, your DNA from your brother, your full-blooded brother, could be a different mix of DNA. Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't know, maybe we won't have Cherokee or Native American blood in the DNA that comes up in the DNA, but they're just because there's that one woman I was telling you about, Sarah Catherine Wood, and she is, so my great-grandfather, that's her grandson. And so it's quite removed for me. That's why I'm 132nd. And
we've got it covered for the different percentages that might pass down, and not a lick of Native American. And it was just, for my grandma in particular, it was a very big shock because she decorated her home that way. And, I remember I still have somewhere from my childhood a ring with turquoise on it. She loved turquoise. It was a very Native American thing. And
I don't know if it's a Cherokee thing, but
I don't know if it's Cherokee. Right. I don't know how much is, generic. Yeah. I also grew up in Blackfoot, Idaho, and there's the Blackfoot Indian tribe.
There's a tribe there, yeah.
Or Native American tribe. It's the Blackfoot Native American tribe. And I remember every year they would come and they would do performances in our elementary school. And so I think kind of that connection of being close to a reservation, seeing that culture, and then knowing like, oh, I'm part of that, and in some kind of way, that a native tribe, it was just really cool. And then once the truth fell that this mystery name, our family history wasn't really what we thought it was, when I find that paper that I did in high school, it's like, you should just shred that. But at the same time, that was my identity at the time. And I don't know how to reconcile that. Yeah. And like you said, cultural appropriation, grandma, she's got dementia, and she will probably still to her dying day, if she can remember it, cling on to the fact that she swears she still has that in her, because that was so ingrained in her identity. And what's appropriation, what's appreciation? There's so many lines, especially when you're mingling not just politics and rights and something so much more personal and intimate.
Everybody comes from somewhere, and everybody comes from a lot of somewheres. And I want to be able to appreciate all those parts of me, and I have. There's other parts of me. I'm Dutch, I'm Polish. English on a lot of things. Everybody comes from somewhere, and so that's kind of where I just don't know. There's so many nuances of what I can explore and what I can feel connected to. And that's why my family, just like yours, feels really connected to this. And maybe it is because it feels special, or maybe it is because it was trendy, I don't know, but they just feel really connected to it. And so because of that, I acquired that connection through these relationships. And now that I'm older, and I just think I'm not sure how to navigate this. I don't know what to do. This was my history. I mean, I've done a lot of research on the Cherokee tribe. When I realized that my family was celebrating its Indianness, to be politically incorrect, but I think that's the appropriate way to say it. Like the Indianness and not a very specific tribe that we supposedly were. I started questioning that and thinking, like, maybe I should research about the actual tribe that I'm supposedly from, these people I'm supposedly from, and there's such a rich history for this particular tribe. And I'm not going to say, I'm sure all the other tribes have very rich histories, but it's just so well documented. And so I feel like even for this tribe, like, how can they not have done their research? It's not like it wasn't laying out for everyone to see.
Well, like you say, Cherokee is very well known. And I'm by far not an expert on Native American tribes. I mean, I'm thinking it was one of the bigger ones, right?
It is.
And I feel like, so when we found out that, by the way, curtain pulled back, there's no Native American there, one of the big reasons why we could justify that in our family history was, I remember being told, oh, there was a racist back down the line in family history, and they destroyed evidence of it because they didn't want to be associated with it. And it kind of seems like it might be the opposite, because once I told someone that, oh yeah, it turns out we don't actually have Native American, they said, oh yeah, it was trendy a while back, a generation or, a few generations back to say that you had Native American in you. I just thought, oh gosh, I don't want to be, I mean, that sounds like it could be my story. And I do feel like a lot of people cling to, especially the Cherokee tribe, because it is so well known. Now, how many people know about the Delaware tribe or say like, oh, I'm Pawnee? Like, I feel like they maybe have a more substantial claim to those tribes. But I think that's also maybe why tribes do keep records like that, because I mean, you can go on history and abuse and land rights and just so many things, but even just so many people wanting that connection. And you look at other family history. I was just talking to my parents and they said, oh yeah, last DNA test came back and you're only 2 to 3% German. Well, my last name is German. I'm just like,
how can only that 2% be this thing that's followed me around?
Right. I mean, I remember growing up thinking, oh yeah, I'm like a quarter. For some reason we thought we were a quarter, which would have meant that grandpa, his parents, one of them was full. I don't know. But your perception of yourself changes, but how much of it really changes, like some of it is just ingrained in you from when you're young. And at the same time, you ask the question, how much does it matter? Because I lived in Poland. You said you're Polish. I forgot that you told me you were. So I'm I lived there for a year and a half, and I remember talking with people about their family history, and people were intrigued by that. I mean, so much history and redrawing of lines and the wars and stuff. But
what made them intrigued by it? Like, there's not very much going on there for family history-wise?
Yeah, well, that was a big thing, is records were destroyed in bombings and in wars. And so, I was talking to this family, and, he would tell me about his experiences in World War II, and you would just see like this man's traumatized eyes glaze over, and just, it was very, very visceral. And I wanted to help them learn more about their history that they wanted. They said, we've tried before, but those Catholic churches that held all the records of like christenings and stuff, they were bombed. And it's when that written history is gone, at some point, people kind of they're cut off. And so does that mean they're not important people, or that they don't have a sense of self? How much does it matter? I don't know.
I guess that's something to face for sure, because who am I? Where do I come from? Those are questions of the soul. And across cultures, we ask that. And I think there's such a draw to know who we come from, who our family has been, and who made us us. And so, yeah, what is it like for someone to not have any connection to that at all?
Yeah.
And where do they get their identity from? And does it just come, from their personal experiences?
Yeah.
And that must be, I mean, in a different way, it's different the way I acquired my identity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have my own experiences that also shape that, but I also have a lot of other people's experiences, these stories, these oral histories, and the family lore that I've adopted in my identity. So that must be a struggle for people, but maybe not.
I think there's no simple answers to pretty much most things in life.
Right.
But not to plug, but a book that I've been working on asked that exact question.
You can plug this.
I know.
Jenna's a writer, guys.
I mean, all of my books pretty much in one way or another address family and identity, and that choice between who you are in literal DNA and your upbringing versus who you choose to be. And, I have one that's, I have one where two main characters are looking in opposite directions and they're both struggling, one not knowing her heritage and one doesn't really bother him. He's more focused on what he wants to become and having the rights to do what he wants and define himself. They come to realize that in a lot of ways their struggle is the same, just trying to figure out, what am I? How much does each concern matter? It is a question, like you said, a question of the soul, a question of the heart, of who we are. More important, what we make of ourselves. But you can look at an adopted person who knows nothing about their heritage.
I just made a note about that, actually. I'm like, who do I know that's adopted?
Yeah.
Who would be willing to talk to me about this?
That would be a great thing.
Yeah, because, I mean, that would be a really interesting insight.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, there's other people, too. Like, my partner, he doesn't have a ton of connection with his family history at the moment. And I've talked to him a little bit about it. And, where does he feel like where he comes from? Does he have any connections? Does
it bother him? I mean, because some people may not care as much. I don't know.
Yeah. I have to ask him about that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get him on the podcast.
I mean, that's not something that people always talk about, right?
Yeah.
Is like, how much does it matter to you where you come from? Especially deeper down. I mean, obviously in some cultures that is more important. You look at, stereotypically we think of the Asian cultures. Like they have rich history in their ancestors. And a lot of other cultures that are not American that still have, much different expanded families than a nuclear. And
I have friends that I've actually thought of bringing on the podcast in the 2 minutes I've been doing the podcast. She is adopted and she's Korean, and her family is white. And so I think she has an interesting perspective on this as well. So for you personally, when you heard about that you might not be Delaware or Pawnee, or was it?
Or Cherokee.
Or Cherokee. Why did I forget that one?
We're just winging it.
Yeah. What did you feel about that? I mean, they said on the phone that your grandmother took it the hardest.
Yeah.
How did you take it though?
I'm trying to remember back to that moment. I think you do a double take, like, really? I think in a lot of ways it's like, I feel insulted, like, oh, you've been duped. Like, you're not really who you are. Like, it's not rolling back the curtain. It's pulling the rug out from underneath you. It's not like we made dream catchers when I was a kid. I don't know if that was necessarily because we thought we had this heritage or if it was just like a fun decorative craft, but I don't know. It didn't change a lot in me, but I feel like it's the wrong reaction. But when are your emotions actually wrong? Or are you allowed to have a right to them? I think it is more of like, I'm insulted, I'm annoyed and frustrated that someone would have lied about this in the past, because I can't understand why they would have, other than for something like vanity, to feel special. And that just seems like a ridiculous lie. And you don't want to be that person. I think if I had firmly sat in the camp of never thinking I had Native American and just growing up around a reservation where they came and did beautiful dances and you got to see, these beautiful headdresses and everything, and just appreciated it as a culture for what it was, not thinking that I was in any way associated with it. Like, I just felt it would have been so much different. But it wasn't life-shattering for me personally. Of course, I don't think my generation, I don't think my siblings took it hard or anything. But we didn't lean on that or maybe cherish it as much as some others might in that same position.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm going to be interviewing as many people who will talk to me and my family. My grandmother still has several siblings alive, and so I asked her today if she would help me set that up, and she's excited about it. So it would be good to talk to them and just to see what their connection is and how much of their identity they take from this. Because let's just say, the big question, which is really not the big question of the podcast, but the big question is, Sarah Catherine Wood, is she or isn't she Cherokee? So let's just assume she is Cherokee. That means still I'm 1/32nd, so it's not much.
Yeah.
But the older generations that are still alive in my family are more. My grandmother is an 8th, which is why she can register with a specific reservation. I'm not the main one in Oklahoma.
I think Native American also has a special place for me because as someone born and raised in America, I think part of us wants to say, well, I associate with those who are oppressed, not just the oppressors. So you can say, oh, well, I'm not one of the bad guys.
Yeah.
And then you go back to that question of, well, what if I had an ancestor that was a slave trader? What if I had an abolitionist in my past? How much does it matter because they're not me? How much shame do you carry and how much pride do you carry? I mean, it's complex, that's for sure.
I don't think there's a right answer, like you said, that there's sometimes the answers are complicated, but definitely exploring them is important to me. I don't know for sure. Maybe that's another podcast, but nobody likes to hear that they had slave owners.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, the odds are not in my favor.
I mean, I haven't had it disclosed to me that we've had any, and then I think back to, Germans. I mean, what do Germans have a bad rap for? Granted, any immigration was,
Was it pre-World War II or was it after World War II?
Exactly. Yeah. And then you go back to, if I'm proud that I'm German, well, my last name doesn't have the traditional spelling. It's been changed to Ellis Island. So am I true German? Even with my measly 2 to 3% apparently.
That's pre-World War II.
I don't know what's Ellis Island. We don't know. Family histories, so much based on lore where, pre-serious technology. No.
Well,
it's a fun discussion.
It is a fun discussion, and I think it's never ending.
For sure.
Discussion.
You're like, but this podcast is.
This podcast is ending. But I want to give you a chance to plug. So you, Jen, are a YouTuber and you're a writer.
Yes. And that is an ice cream truck.
And that's an ice cream truck, but it sounds great. Like underneath, like we're ending and then it's coming in. Just pretend like I put that in there, guys. I haven't figured out how to do it yet.
Overlapping music. Yes, so I have a website, J. Hauser Writes. So it's got my non-traditional German spelling. So JHOUSER writes like writing a letter.com, and then also my YouTube channel. And I also do Twitter and Instagram when I get around to it, which isn't much.
But the website and YouTube are the best.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, just books about heavy themes of family and self-identity and kind of just the different variety of the mix we get in life and what matters. Because I don't know, for me that is important.
So I believe her siblings are also registered, or at least some of them. So yeah, what did they think about it?
And I mean, that's more than we had. We never knew of anyone actually registered. It was just that whole it's back in the line. So,
right. But you had that person's name.
Yeah.
And their family history, and you wrote that report on them.
Yeah.
So there must have been somebody. I mean, do they still exist, or was that person made up?
Right. At this point, I honestly don't know. I haven't personally done more research into it after we found out the DNA results.
Yeah.
So maybe, it's that blind trust again that I had when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I mean, DNA is hard to lie to. But I don't know. What do you think you would have a significant shift if you were to find out that you actually have zero ties?
Yeah, I think it would be a little bit hard. I'm a writer as well, and I have I feel like you felt,
Mm-hmm.
when I was around powwows, or, we drove through reservations, or I felt a little bit of a weird kinship to that.
Yeah.
I guess I shouldn't say weird. I felt a kinship to that. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe I shouldn't have, because it wasn't my tribe, but I felt a kinship to that. And so yeah, I grew up with that. I grew up bragging a little bit about it because I thought it was special. And, being Dutch was less special.
Mm-hmm.
I also, this is something that has been this disconnect for me between my generation and my grandmother's generation has been something on my mind for a long time. And so I have, I'm a poet, and I have some poems about this concept. This is even before the question was, are we or are we not,
Mm-hmm.
even in play. And but more back then, I was thinking, like, my grandmother feels this so strongly, and she's so proud of this part of her heritage. And why don't I have that connection? Why don't I feel that connection to it? Because I don't feel like I have a connection to really anything. I have a connection to being American white. We're American. Our food dishes and things like that we, can bring in from different places.
Yeah.
But it's still, at the end of the day, you go into a classroom when you're little, and everybody looks white, and they all have the same accent, and we were all born in the same place.
We're in a lesser diverse part of the United States.
Right. I didn't grow up here, but still, yeah.
Or where I've lived, not very diverse.
Yeah, and so it's just kind of like feeling special about the Native Americanness was more so than the other things. The other things didn't make me feel special because everybody else was those two things.
Yeah,
too.
for sure.
Everybody else was European. One 30-second Cherokee with Aubrey Jean, and with all the favors I can cash in. Produced by me, Aubrey. Executive produced by nobody, because I don't know what that means. The Anchor app by Spotify holds my hand for all the engineering. The music is also found on Anchor. You can rate and review this show on many podcast platforms someday, and you might find your review featured on a future episode. Or I might burn it in effigy. Got comments? Send me a message at anchor.fm/Aubrey-Jean. That's anchor.fm/Aubrey-Jean.